Hi there, welcome back. Welcome back to video 2 on the restoration or repair of this Grundig Satellite 3400 Pro. And I have done something. As you can see, I've stripped it. I have removed its clothing, and strangely enough, this was actually a very pleasant surprise. I recall from the 2100 that I did, the Satellite 2100, that removing it from the cabinet was a little complicated. And a lot of the stuff I read indicated that getting this out was difficult. You had to be very careful, it was tricky, blah, 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 blah. Now, I've done that before with other radios where getting it out is an operation in itself. This one was a very, very pleasant surprise. This service manual actually gives you very, very clear instructions in English on how to do just that. So removal from the chassis, this is 379, I presume it's March 79. And it says pull out the mains cable connector, remove any dry rechargeable batteries. This had no battery in it, so that was already done. Then it says loosen the 9 screws at B and remove the back plate in figure 1. Here's the problem. The quality of the scan just doesn't let you see what they mean by B, but I'll tell you, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then underneath 7, 8, 9. You remove those, this thing just flips out, comes out without any problems. Then it says pull out the telescopic and aerial connector. Here I remember from the previous one, I seem to recall you had to actually remove the whole antenna assembly, if I'm not mistaken. This thing was a breeze. There's literally one small connector. You unplug it and leave the antenna in the chassis itself. Then it says unscrew tuner switching knob on the spindle inside the receiver. Again, same story. You look inside the receiver, the knob, you turn it a few times till you see that screw. You unscrew it and you pull the knob out. Point 5, unscrew 2 screws in the bottom cover and remove the cover. Here is an error. I don't believe it's the bottom cover, it's the top cover. It's here and here. This whole thing with the handle just comes out. So then you go to pull off 9 rotary and switching knobs. Okay, that's fair enough. The actual switches, those flip switches, stay there. You just remove the round knobs and they come out quite easily. You just pull them. Don't put too much force on it. Some of them can be a little bit dried in there, but they do come out. Just put them aside carefully. And then it says loosen 4 screws marked in figure 2. Again, problem with, oh, actually there is, you can actually see a ring. I think they try to show you, but it's here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. No problem. 4 screws, and then carefully remove the chassis and unplug the connector. This thing just comes out perfectly. To the back, there's one connector underneath here on the front, which connects the speakers to the chassis. It's literally a plug-in socket. You just disconnect it and the whole thing is done. Simple as that. We've got the radio out of the chassis. It actually stands quite well. I was worried that when you're trying to stand it on the bench that you might bend something. I'm not sure how this is going to be when I lie it on its back, but we'll see. Anyway, let's have a closer look at what we have. We can see that some of these boards are fairly accessible. Others need to be accessed from the back. This one obviously all accessible from the front. The tuning will have to be from the back. This board down here, the BFO and so on, I think comes out this way. But again, everything looks pretty accessible. There are all the adjustment points that we need here. Switches are nice and visible and can be cleaned from here because you can spray contact cleaner in there. It's looking fine. There really are 2 boards here, that one there, that one there. This module, I don't think we've got any problems with it. There is something I can see here which is interesting. These switches which were broken are they're actually operational. The switch itself isn't broken, it's just the knob there. And here's another one. This is that one that I was convinced was messed up, but it operates. This is the band and band spread. So the switch is fine, it's just that the shaft is broken. This little cover has obviously, someone tried to take it out. The cover was actually twisted inside, so it looked like the whole switch was sort of broken apart, but it's not. That's a good sign. Again, these switches can be accessed from here. I'll have to figure a way of extending this so I can put the knob on. And before continuing, I'd just like to thank the sponsors of this video, PCBWay. If you visit the website, you'll see they're running the 4th PCBWay design contest. Some pretty amazing cash prizes just make their services all that more attractive. As usual, you can get the 10 PCBs for $5 with an amazing turnaround time, as well as some really all-inclusive services that allow you to take your project from your initial stages all the way to production. That board looks perfect. There's a little light on here. Sometimes these burn out and I'll try and replace them with LEDs. I'm not sure if this thing is burnt out yet. We'll find out as we go along. Everything looks pretty clean and it looks like nobody has been in here, which is really a blessing. As you probably know, it's always easier to repair problems with the original circuit without having to deal with mess ups that somebody else might have made. And unfortunately, that does happen a lot. But anyway, what we have here that might require changing would be maybe these two tantalums. Tantalums are notoriously bad, some of them. Nothing else sort of screams at me here. There are boards on the back, I can see that, but this one is the one facing us, so that's what we're focusing on. This board for the BFO has got the knobs underneath, the pots underneath, but I think this thing will come out if we need to get to them. What else do we have here? Oh, this is just a pot. All the adjustments on here. Again, another tantalum. The rest is a couple more tantalums over here, a red one and a blue one. I don't see much else that may require serious attention. Okay, that looks good. This is where our main challenge lies. This is the on-off switch, which I don't know what it's doing inside. Something's wrong with it. This is the counter. One of these is the dial light, and then in here we see the caps. The filter cap, the big one, is down there. There are quite a few others. This will be the part that will be tackled first. All these look fine. They obviously need cleaning with contact cleaner. But one of the first things I need to do is I need to remove this section. I'm not sure whether I do it from the front or from the back. I think it might be from the back. Remove that and get in there. This we've actually already seen, but there is a little bit more we can look at. All the radio section, switching section over there. Again, not that many components that would obviously need replacing, unless there's something wrong with them. But we do have access. This slides out. This board obviously slides out of these runners or guides. I think when people say that it's difficult to remove, I think they're talking more about the actual boards than getting this out of the chassis, because that part was a real breeze. This board here is the supply board, and I think this whole thing slides out here. There's a ground lug that needs to be desoldered there. I'll have to do this slowly and check what I can determine. There's not much on the underside. The back of the turret tuner I'm going to leave for last because it actually unclips. Maybe there is a solder tag for ground, I'm not sure. The digital unit, this is the whole digital unit. Bloody hell, one heck of a big unit just for the for the display. I thought this was something to do with the IFs, but it's not. I think it's the actual full digital unit, and the signals come in here and then they get well, detect it and everything else and display the frequency on the front. That's a pretty massive thing just for a display, but I guess you had to do what you had to do. Looking down at the bottom there, I can't see much. I need to remove this board and tackle the power supply, the switching, and obviously the audio. We know these two are the audio amplifiers, so obviously this board carries all the power. Let me get, you might have noticed that when I'm nervous about starting something, I yak on for a long time. I recognize that myself, and having done so, I will shut up and take this out. Well, I got it out. In fact, I slid it out. Now, how do I describe to you how I did this? Because this I would have liked to have seen somewhere. And the reason I'm describing after the fact is that I didn't know how to do it initially. Okay, first things first, you remove this connector. This connector on the side here is the one that connects the transformer to the whole shebang. And if you look at the schematic, it's pretty easy to see there are 6 contacts from and to the transformer, and those are clearly visible when we look at the schematic. So when I take this out, I know that my transformer is completely removed from the circuit. Okay, next thing, there are 2 screws. One of them is here, and it's from the back when this thing's still in there. You remove that screw, and then one is on the underside through the front there, and you have to look in there. There's like a little lever thing there with another screw, so you remove that screw as well. Then you got some clips. Then you've got that solder tag thingy over here, and you've got to remove that and you've got to remove it and bend it up because that's holding the board down or soldered to the board. This one was actually loose. It wasn't soldered at all. So maybe the ground wasn't at its best either. Then what do you do? Oh, then you've got 3 clips, 2 in the front, one on the left, one on the right. You've got to lift those, and then you've got one here at the back, which you've got to pull down. So this board, it clips over here, so this board can slide out. Then I think that's it. Oh, then you've got one more socket, which goes to the back of the counter board. So you unclip that. And then it's a question of just slowly pulling it out and looking out for wires that might be tangling the whole thing in place. There aren't that many. And in fact, what happens is once you've got it in this position, you can actually, everything is connected or can be connected except the transformer. Well, you can actually connect that as well, but I'd rather not. We're going to be testing this whole thing without the transformer. I've got the DC supply that I can use. And you can actually operate this whole thing in this position. So we can actually do whatever we need to do here and test if it's having any effect on the radio. Of course, not forgetting that the speaker is disconnected at this point, which we did when we removed this thing from the chassis. I hope that's clear. And the reason I want it to be clear is that I want to remember how to put this back. You thought this is for you. Yeah, it's always good to have these records. Take photographs, make notes, speak into a camera like I'm doing. And when you want to put this back, you make sure you don't forget anything. The result is that this thing is now accessible, visible and accessible. I can get to the back. I can move it out. I can operate this whole thing on its side. And I probably will do that because it makes everything a lot more accessible to solder and desolder. But to rest it on the workbench, this is safer because otherwise the whole thing might just fall. And you definitely don't want to do that. That'll break something. Okay, let me carry on here. I know this looks like a mess, but believe me, there is method in my madness. Watch this. It's working. Well, it's not really working. It's dying off after a while, but the power's going in at the mains, and I connected the transformer, obviously, and it's getting through when I switch on. And if you recall, when I switched this on, I wasn't getting anything. I had to go to the point after the switch and all that jazz. And I'll show you exactly what I did. All this wiring here is just to make sure that all the grounds are where they should be, that nothing is touching. What happened? Well, it was actually this guy over here. You'll probably recall that when you put in this, let me take it out, I mentioned that you have to pull this down. See, it clips down. Then you put in your socket or your plug. And the reason for this is that there's a switch here. This is actually two switches. One is labeled as X on the schematic and the other one is labeled as Y on the schematic. And what this does is it flips from mains to battery. When it's up like this, the battery connections are passed through. And when it's down like that, the mains is activated. And it's activated, you know it's activated because you can then fit in the socket, the plug into the socket, so, and also into there. So this is a switch. It's not just a protector, it's actually a switch, and the switch is on here on the underside. And I found that that switch needed some serious cleaning. Let me show you on the schematic. As usual, there's no trick here. All you need to do is follow the lines. If you recall, we knew we had voltage supply here when we plugged in this whole thing. And it went to there, and then it went to there, and it went to there. And this is the one that I wasn't sure about. And it proved to be a switch on the underside, which I then found on the service manual. It's actually X1 to 6. See, here we've got the power supply board. This board is actually seen from the, what does it say, component side. I'm not so sure about that, doesn't matter. But you see here, you've got X written on there, and you've got Y written on there. And that is X1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And Y1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And this is where that transformer plugs in, that STV601 that I mentioned earlier, the black one on the side. So we know that the mains is coming in here. There's the entry points. And we know this is on the underside. It's under that black device over there, as you can see. That is labeled, well, marked off with this dashed line. So this here had to be a switch inside that unit. And what I needed to do was to clean it up because those contacts weren't making at all. So as soon as I made that, and these are made, this is set as if the mains is on. NB, somebody mentioned, is battery or nets, battery or mains. So that's the battery mains activator. And EA is aus and an, so off and on. So that's the A switches and B switches. But fixing or focusing on this one first, it was simple to determine that we weren't getting it from there to pin A6 on the back of that on-off switch. So it could only be that connection. And this is also somewhere else. These X's are, I think I saw them somewhere here. Where did I see? Oh, these are Y, the Y connections. So when I cleaned the X's, the Y's got cleaned as well. There's obviously an X1, 2, 3 somewhere because those things are soldered in. But anyway, as soon as I got that done, it meant that we can plug in our mains over here. 16.8 volts we know we've got. And it gets to here and it goes through there. So that connection is made and it goes to there. And then this is ready to switch on. At the moment, it's in the off position. As soon as you switch on, this point makes, and you get your supply going to everywhere else. And the place I tested it was on the collector of T transistor 610, as I did before. So what I'm finding here is I'm getting about 15 volts. So there is a bit of a drop. This thing could be leaking quite badly, but I have access to this now. The point is I wanted to see this thing working one step at a time. If you don't follow through, if you don't follow the line through, you might do all this, recapping, change all the electrolytics. It's all very well. There's another one there. And you switch it on and this thing is not working again, or still not working. And the trick with this is because it's not that easy to remove. It's not difficult, but it's a bit of a job. It's a good idea to test things inside or on that circuit before you put it back. So that's working now. We know the radio is working. It's the same response as we got when we put the mains, or rather when we put a supply on here. We connected it to that transistor or that transistor, I'm not sure. It's incredibly weak, very, very poor audio. So we know we've got other problems, but the point is the supply is getting there. And now my next task will be to, recap this whole thing. There's an alignment, setting the bias current or the idle current on these two transistors. It's going to be that one or that one. I'm not sure at the moment. I think it's this one. Here's an X adjustable with R636. 636 is this one here. So you adjust the bias current through those transistors by opening this connector. Is obviously a short, solder short. JC, what is it? 6 milliamps plus minus 1 milliamp. So you'll adjust that trim pot till you get that current, and then you take your ammeter out of there and you can solder it back. So it's all following the rules as we know them. The normal procedure, which is sort out the power supply, then sort out the amp. Now, I have by no means sorted out the power supply yet, but I've got the switching done. Replace all the caps and check all the components on that board. Put it back, clean it, put it back. If I have to remove it again, it's not that much of a big deal. I'd rather not, but it's not a big deal. But I want to make sure I've got all the voltages coming out of there in good order. I can see where the limits of this board are. If you follow this, I think this is the way it works. This dotted line here, you see this dashed line here, up to there, there, all that seems to be on that board. Yeah, this is all on that board. So the idea is to check for voltages and everything on this board. So we make sure that we've got that board taken care of. In fact, I'm just going to paint this board so that we don't get lost. There we are. We know exactly what is on that board. So we know exactly what it is we have to check before we put the board in. There are quite a few points where we are given voltages. There are quite a few transistors in here, quite a lot of switching. It's pretty busy. So this one's going to be the next task, and I'll report back when I've done this board and tell you what I found and where we're going to go forward on. I haven't actually decided whether I'm going to remove this board completely or work on it on here. It all depends on how accessible things are. I might leave it on here. I think I can get hold of the capacitors. There is a ground sheet at the bottom here that needs to be desoldered. It all depends on how far away I can bring it without damaging any of the wires, making sure none of them break off. It's always a trade-off. You can literally just mark off everything that you desolder, remove the board completely, and then, do everything outside, which is a lot easier, but then you solder things back, or you can try and do it on here. I might try do it on here. I'll see what works best. Anyway, I've got a lot of work to do on this board before I report back. So I want to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, click like, share, subscribe, and all that jazz. And if you want to support the channel, you can do so on Patreon. Links are at the end of the video and in the description below. Once again, thanks for watching. Bye for now and stay safe.